A bizarre incident occurred in the outskirts of an American suburb called Raccoon City. It was later revealed that the terrible disaster had been caused by the T-virus, a mutagenetic toxin created by an international enterprise, Umbrella Incorporated, producing bioweapons experiments. The Raccoon City Police Department Special STARS team immediately began the investigation. The case was apparently closed thanks to the efforts of STARS members Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and Rebecca Chambers. But the Umbrella Corporation's experiments were far from finished.
I think it's time that I take off the jacket for this one. Might even take off the shades. Take things in a much more serious tone. Haha, I love games. I love them a lot, especially old school games. But this was a game I've been wanting to talk about ever since I started Onyx The Gaming Machine. Now, this is a game that's considered my favorite of the franchise, and it's a game that I have a lot of knowledge on, and I mean a lot of knowledge, and not just in the type of coding that's done in the game, not just the story of it, or even the different scenarios. Y'all knew this was coming. I'm going to be talking about Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2, a story that was put into two different parts and had different scenarios put with it. And I'm going to show it off right here in terms of the actual case. So what we have here is the Leon disc right there. I think people see that right there. That's the Leon disc right there. And then what we got here in the second disc is the Claire disc, as y'all can see right there. This had different ports as well. Now, however, this is for the PlayStation. But the most interesting thing is that my favorite version of Resident Evil 2 is for the Nintendo 64, which, as people know, I love me some Nintendo 64. Why do I talk about this game now? Why did I put it off, sir, for so long? Why did I do it? I just wanted to wait until the right time to get cocky about this fucking game. I love this game, and at the same time, I know so much about this game. So much. Of course, everybody should know of Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 1 basically being the STARS team of Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Albert Wesker, Rebecca Chambers, and at the same time, other so-called survivors that ended up not making it in this so-called mansion of horrors. Now, when it came to Resident Evil 1, the original version had the worst voice dialogue you could even think of. And I mean that a lot. But still, Resident Evil 1 was a very iconic game, and still to this day can actually scare certain people. Why talk about Resident Evil 1? Why am I not talking about that one? Well, because Resident Evil 2 was more iconic than Resident Evil 1. But you know, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking, right? I know what you're thinking. You know, there's so many Resident Evil games to talk about, right? Why talk about this one? aside from the fact that it is my favorite one in the Resident Evil franchise, I just loved how it was just completely programmed. There was flaws in it, I know. Yeah, there was glitches, I know. And there was also times in the game that would piss you off, I know. But the thing is, this was part of my childhood and part of my bringing into the PlayStation console itself. But why talk about it when I could show you some stuff? So everybody, sit back, get your favorite drinking beverage, get your favorite snacking item, and we're going to be diving on in to a little bit of Resident Evil 2, and I'll tell you a lot of the stuff that I know. So get ready for this shit. So let's just dive right on into this bull, right? Let's just get right on in. Resident Evil 2.
January 21st, 1998 was when Resident Evil 2, also known as Biohazard 2, blessed everyone's lives and paved a future for a lot of gamers as they grew up. The gameplay of Resident Evil 2 focuses on exploration, puzzle solving, and combat, and also features typical survival horror elements such as limited saves and ammunition. Resident Evil 2 also features the same basic gameplay mechanics as its predecessor, Resident Evil. Resident Evil 2 was also widely acclaimed by critics who praised its atmosphere, setting, graphics, and audio. The voice acting and inventory system too. These qualities surpassed its predecessor, Resident Evil. Following its initial success on the Sony PlayStation, it was ported to PC, the Nintendo 64, the Sega Dreamcast, and the Nintendo GameCube, and for some stupid reason, Capcom released a version for the Gamecom handheld, which sucked honestly. It was the only thing that really sucked to me in terms of Resident Evil 2. But the game is set 2 months after the events of the first Resident Evil. The game's two main characters are Leon S. Kennedy.
What have we got here?
A rookie police officer on his first day in the Raccoon City Police Department, and Claire Redfield,
I'm finally here.
a spunky college student looking for her brother Chris Redfield. Little did they know that they were entering a nightmare they would never forget, and it would change their lives forever.
I'll meet you there.
Okay.
While searching for an escape route from the City of Nightmares, Claire meets a little girl named Sherry, who is on the run from a humanoid creature that is stalking her, and Leon encounters a beautiful Asian in red named Ada Wong, who claims to be looking for her boyfriend, John, an Umbrella researcher, which, if you remember from playing Resident Evil 1, there is a mention of these two people. Mind blown. But if you think this humanoid creature that is stalking Sherry is the only main threat, oh no, you are sadly wrong. The T-103, also known as Mr. X, a special tyrant sent to obtain any remaining sample of the G-virus, as well as to kill any surviving individuals in the RPD station. Yes, this tyrant is stalking you as well. Doesn't that sound amazing, everyone? I think you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. Now, of course, this is the game that introduces a new but well-known evolving enemy in future games, called the Licker, a creature that is blind but has a great sense of hearing and a very long tongue. They also have an exposed brain, strong muscle development, and literally no skin. And yes, they are filled with lots of rage. Finally, of course, it wouldn't be a classic Resident Evil game without different zombified creatures like humans, dogs, etc. Maybe even creatures that are of an abnormal size. But I recommend Resident Evil 2 to anyone, especially people that want to grasp a feel on the origins of this amazing franchise. But why is Resident Evil 2 my favorite Resident Evil game in terms of the old school formula and start of the franchise? Why not Resident Evil 1? Why not even Resident Evil 3? Why not even Resident Evil Code Veronica? Why is it always Resident Evil 2 for me? Well, for one, you know, you're not stuck in a mansion the whole time in terms of Resident Evil 1. And honestly, if it wasn't for Resident Evil 2, we wouldn't have some of the features that we had gotten in Resident Evil 3, plus the added ones we got in Resident Evil 3. But at the same time, think of it like this. Just paint this picture in your head. In Resident Evil 1, you were stuck in a mansion that was filled with zombies and different types of creatures, and of course certain betrayals. But in Resident Evil 2, you're not a trained individual like Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield or even Barry Burton. No, you're playing as people that maybe have a basic training in terms of weaponry and even intellectual thinking. For example, Leon is a police officer that was supposed to have his first day on the job at the Raccoon City Police Department. He goes into Raccoon City and he runs into zombies. Wouldn't that mess with your brain for the rest of your life? It would even give you nightmares at night when you would be sleeping. Paint this picture in your head though. In Resident Evil 1, you were stuck in a mansion. In Resident Evil 2, you're stuck in a city that's completely filled with zombies, different creatures, and they're all out to get you. Your only thing you can do is survive. You have limited weaponry, limited space in your inventory. Yeah, you have a box that you can deposit things in, but it's going to take not just skill, but it's going to take good reflex to get through this game. Even with Claire. You know, even with Claire, she gets different weapons at her disposal. She doesn't get the same weapons as Leon, and except in terms of a handgun, but even so, Leon's handgun is different than Claire's, and Claire's vice versa as well. Resident Evil 2 leaves a lasting impression on you that doesn't end up really getting recreated in games after it. I mean, Resident Evil 3 does a good job at adding certain features to the Resident Evil formula since, you know, Resident Evil 1 and even Resident Evil 2. But at the same time, you feel more vulnerable in Resident Evil 2 than in Resident Evil 3, and even so forth and so forth. That's why, to me, the hardest Resident Evil game can be tied between Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, and it's mostly in terms of vulnerability and lack of inventory space. I guess you could say Resident Evil 1 would be tougher than Resident Evil 2, but that doesn't mean that Resident Evil 2 doesn't have its issues that puts you in a vulnerable tight spot. So in closing, why do I recommend Resident Evil 2? Well, I recommend it so you can get a grasp of what the formula used to be before more stuff started getting added to it, like enhanced graphics, added more inventory space, more weapons that you can collect. Resident Evil 2, in similarity to Resident Evil 1, had its simple arsenal, but it always had added small features. But I won't get into spoilers about that, because if I was to get into spoilers about any more of Resident Evil 2, you probably wouldn't want to play it. So, everyone listening right now, go out and get any version of Resident Evil 2. I would recommend either the PC version, the PlayStation version, or the Nintendo 64 version. My favorite version being the N64 version, because it has added stuff in terms of the lore. And those are in stuff called EX files. Look it up if you ever want to find out what those are. But that's really all I need to say.
So, everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, click that like button. Leave a nice positive comment down below. Let me know if you learned anything new today. Let me know if you like Resident Evil 2. And if you would ever decide to revisit Resident Evil 2 again in your life. But never forget your past. Never forget where things came from. Because one day they may not be there anymore. So, thank you all for watching.
You want stars? I'll give you stars.